Today, we're diving into one of the most incredible psychological case studies you'll ever come across. It's the true story of a little boy named Dibs, a child so completely locked inside himself that he was a total mystery to every single adult in his life. His journey is this powerful, raw look at the human spirit and its fight to be seen.
This was his daily reality. Every afternoon, it was the same desperate, heartbreaking cry. For Dibs, you see, going home wasn't some comfort at the end of the day. It was a battle, a full-on emotional war that he fought every single day. And it was a sign of this deep, terrifying storm raging inside him.
So let's start at his special school. This is the stage where this daily, gut-wrenching struggle against the world played out.
Okay, picture this. The final bell rings, and all the other kids are excitedly grabbing their coats, right? Well, not Dibs. He would retreat. He'd find a corner, curl himself into the tightest little ball, and just press himself against the wall, almost like he was trying to become a part of it, to just disappear. The whole scene was just so cold. His mom was often late, and sometimes she wouldn't even come herself. She'd send the chauffeur, and the driver would just walk in, pick Dibs up, and carry him out to the car. Dibs wasn't treated like a child in these moments. He was more like a package to be delivered, utterly and completely alone.
And his behavior during school hours? Just as isolated. He literally lived on the edges of the room, crawling along the walls, hiding under tables. He never, ever spoke a word to anyone. He wouldn't look you in the eye. And if anyone, a teacher, another kid, got too close, he would just freeze solid, like a statue. So you can imagine this created a huge puzzle for all the adults trying to help him. Who was the real Dibs? Was there severe cognitive impairment, or was there something else entirely going on?
And this is where it gets so contradictory, so baffling. On the one hand, you have a boy who won't talk, who hides and crawls. But then, you'd see him with a book, and he had this almost scholarly fascination, carefully turning every single page. He could focus on things with an intensity that just screamed intelligence. The two sides just didn't add up.
You know, the school doctor really captured everyone's frustration. He tried to examine Dibs, but the boy just built this impenetrable wall. He'd back into a corner, ready to scratch and fight. Nobody could get close enough to even begin to understand what was happening with him. Now, what about his home life? The clues we get are, well, they're sparse, but they are incredibly telling. His father, a famous scientist who not once, ever, visited the school. His mother, she was always talking about her other child, a daughter named Dorothy, who she called perfect. And maybe the most telling thing of all, both parents seemed to have just accepted the idea that Dibs was intellectually disabled. It felt easier, maybe, than facing a much more painful truth.
So, after 2 long years of this, with almost no progress, the school was about to ask Dibs to leave. But they decided to try one last thing: bring in an outside specialist.
And this specialist is the author of this story, a clinical psychologist named Virginia Axline. Her job was basically to observe Dibs, meet with his mom, and then give her professional opinion. This was, for all intents and purposes, Dibs' last chance at this school.
But you know what's amazing? His teachers hadn't given up hope. One teacher in particular, Hedda, had this strong feeling that Dibs was right on the edge of a breakthrough. She just believed that keeping up those intense defenses was taking so much energy that something had to give, and soon.
So the day comes. The psychologist arrives to observe Dibs in his own environment. And what she saw, and more importantly, how she chose to react, was about to change everything.
When he was just left to his own devices, Dibs was surprisingly methodical, almost gentle. Yeah, he crawled around the edges of the room, but he also softly touched the leaves on the plants. He'd pick up each mineral from a collection and just study it. And then he grabbed a book, turned his chair to face the wall, and went through it page by page with this incredible focus.
So a teacher, wanting to show the psychologist what they were dealing with, decided to approach him. Her question was super soft, really kind, just a simple attempt to connect over the book he was holding. But to Dibs, that gentle question felt like an attack, an intrusion. His reaction was instant. He hurled the book across the room, dropped to the floor, and just went completely rigid, face down. He was shutting out the entire world that had dared to try and get in. A little while later, after he'd gotten back up, the psychologist tried something totally different. She didn't ask him what he was doing. She didn't put any pressure on him. She just walked over, held out her hand, and quietly invited him to come with her to a playroom down the hall.
And then it happened, the breakthrough. He hesitated for just a second, but then he reached out and took her hand. For the very first time, Dibs willingly walked out of that classroom with a stranger. It was a small action, but it was absolutely monumental.
So where did she take him? To a therapeutic playroom, a space designed specifically to let kids speak when they just don't have the words.
And this is the whole idea behind something called play therapy. For a kid like Dibs, who can't talk about his feelings or his trauma, the toys become his words. Play becomes his language. In this safe room, he could act out everything he was feeling inside, all the fear, all the anger, without anyone asking him a direct question.
So once inside the room, Dibs walked right over to a dollhouse. And then he spoke, not really to the psychologist, but more at the house. And his voice was just filled with this pain as he kept repeating the same phrase over and over again, showing this deep obsession with being locked in, or maybe locked out. Then, as he's messing with the dollhouse, he discovers something. The walls. They can be taken out. He pulls one away and makes this incredibly powerful statement, talking about himself in the third person. Dibs doesn't like walls.
And that leads to this amazing, triumphant moment. He starts yanking every single wall out of that dollhouse, one after another, shouting at himself, encouraging himself. This wasn't just him playing with a toy. This was a symbolic demolition. He was starting to tear down the emotional prison he'd been living in.
Think about it. In just 1 hour, Dibs revealed more about himself than he had in the past 2 years. He showed he could connect, that he could express himself, and that deep down he was desperate to be free. So the big question was, now that he'd torn down the walls in the playroom, could he finally tear down the walls inside himself?